Most people have never read the financial statements of their pension fund. If they did, they would panic. Hidden beneath optimistic reports are deficits so large that experts call them unpayable. Public pension funds in major cities are projected to hit insolvency by 2028. Corporate pension plans are underfunded by trillions. Social security systems are running mathematical deficits every year with no path back to solvency. Yet the public remains unaware because the crisis grows in silence, year after year. Politicians refuse to address it because acknowledging the truth would be political suicide. Companies won't admit it because it would destroy their stock prices. And workers? They simply trust that retirement is guaranteed. They don't realize the bomb has already been lit, and every year, the fuse gets shorter. The pension system was built for a world that no longer exists. When modern pensions were designed in the mid-20th century, life expectancy was barely 65. Most people died shortly after retirement. Today, millions live 20 to 30 years past retirement age. Meanwhile, birth rates have collapsed. Fewer young workers are contributing, while older citizens are collecting for decades. The math is brutal. The once reliable bond markets that generated stable pension returns collapsed after years of near-zero interest rates. Stocks, which funds depended on for high returns, have become volatile and overpriced. And governments continued to expand benefits without increasing contributions. The entire model broke, quietly, slowly, and completely. By the time experts sounded the alarm, the damage was irreversible. Fingerprint system on Earth uses one trick to appear healthier than it is: optimistic assumptions. They assume investment returns of 7 to 8% indefinitely, even though real markets rarely deliver this without extreme risk. They assume workers will keep contributing at the same rate, even though automation and aging populations shrink the workforce. They assume retirees will die earlier, even though medical progress keeps extending lifespans. These assumptions create the illusion of solvency. On paper, everything looks fine. In reality, funds are bleeding cash, selling assets and borrowing money to pay retirees. The cover-up is global, coordinated, and deliberate. Because if the truth was revealed, the financial markets would collapse overnight. Analysts call 2028 the point of no return, the year when multiple major pension systems hit critical failure simultaneously. States in the US face unprecedented payout gaps. European pension schemes are expected to run deficits larger than their national budgets. Japan's pension system, once considered the strongest in the world, is projected to shrink dramatically as the country becomes the oldest society in human history. This convergence creates a global shockwave. Governments will be forced to make impossible decisions: raise taxes to historic levels, cut benefits for millions, increase retirement age again, or print money to keep the system alive. All options lead to economic and political chaos. The retirement crisis becomes unavoidable, undeniable, and unstoppable. The first casualty of the 2028 pension collapse is retirement age. Governments will push it to 68, then 70, and eventually 75. But raising the retirement age does not fix the system. It simply delays the collapse. Millions of older workers will struggle to stay in jobs their bodies can no longer handle. Companies will face rising costs and lower productivity. Young workers will find even fewer opportunities as older employees stay in the workforce longer. The generational conflict intensifies. Retirement, once a universal milestone, becomes a privilege only the wealthy can access, while ordinary citizens work until their health collapses. The pension model we know today, guaranteed lifetime payouts, will be phased out. Governments and corporations will shift the entire burden to individuals through self-funded retirement. Workers will be told to save more, invest more, and prepare for their own old age. But with wages stagnating, inflation rising, and living costs exploding, millions have no ability to save. As a result, retirement becomes a disappearing dream. Future generations will never experience the stability their parents enjoyed. The wealthy will retreat into private pension schemes and high-yield investments. The poor will face a life of permanent work, The middle class will be squeezed out of existence. When pensions collapse, societies fracture. Senior poverty increases. Healthcare systems overload. Housing crises deepen as elderly citizens cannot afford basic rent. Political anger erupts, with protests demanding the benefits that were promised for decades. Governments scramble to restore trust by printing money, triggering inflation that makes everything worse. Younger generations refuse to fund a collapsing system they no longer believe in. The intergenerational contract, the agreement that workers support retirees, breaks. This unraveling becomes the defining crisis of the late 2020s and early 2030s. By the 2030s, a new retirement model emerges. It is not generous, comfortable, or guaranteed. It is survival-based. Governments provide minimal basic income support, just enough to avoid social chaos, but far from a dignified retirement. Private companies offer investment plans tied to market performance, shifting all risk onto workers. Technology companies introduce AI-driven personal pension systems. Meanwhile, individuals depend on side businesses, part-time work, and entrepreneurship to survive old age. Retirement becomes fragmented, unstable, and deeply unequal, a reflection of a world where long-term security no longer exists. The 2028 pension collapse will be remembered as the moment the modern social contract died, a turning point where societies realized that the economic promises of the past were unsustainable. But in this destruction lies a hidden opportunity. People begin to rethink their relationship with work, savings, and independence. Communities rebuild support systems. Younger generations learn financial literacy earlier. Nations reconsider population strategies, immigration reforms, and investment models to rebuild sustainable futures. The collapse becomes a catalyst for redesigning the economy, painfully, but necessarily. But several U.S. states quietly edge toward financial collapse as pension obligations overwhelm their budgets. They cannot declare bankruptcy, so they hide the crisis behind delayed payments, reduced cost of living adjustments, and accounting tricks. Municipal bond markets start to panic. Credit ratings fall. Investors demand higher yields to compensate for rising risk. The math no longer works. Too many retirees, too few workers, and too much promised money that simply does not exist. States once seen as financially stable now struggle to stay afloat, exposing the fragile foundation of the entire retirement system. When cuts finally hit, millions of retirees feel the impact instantly. Fixed incomes shrink. Medical costs rise. Many seniors are forced back into the workforce just to survive. A new reality emerges. Older workers taking low-wage jobs once meant for teenagers. Families absorb aging parents into already tight households. Consumer spending drops sharply as retirees tighten their budgets. The shockwave spreads across the economy, revealing how dependent entire sectors were on retiree spending, and how devastating the collapse of that income becomes. The crisis spills across borders. Europe faces its worst pension decline in modern history, hit hardest in countries with aging populations and generous benefits. Asian economies contend with shrinking workforces and exploding retiree demands. Emerging markets confront their first major retirement wave without the wealth to support it. Governments slash benefits, raise retirement ages, and impose austerity measures. Confidence in national systems fades, fueling political anger and social unrest. What began as a U.S. crisis becomes a global reckoning. Corporate retirement plans, once the modern alternative to pensions, buckle under inflation and market volatility. Workers discover that decades of contributions have not kept up with rising costs. Target date funds lag behind expectations. Bond funds deliver negative real returns. Companies quietly cut employer matches to save money. The dream of a market-funded retirement begins to collapse, leaving millions unprepared for old age. A system built on constant market growth falters in a world where growth is no longer guaranteed. Financed companies and private asset managers step in with new AI-driven shadow pensions. They promise stability through advanced algorithms and automated planning, But they come with strict withdrawal rules, high fees, and immense control over personal wealth. Governments embrace them because they shift retirement responsibility away from the state. Workers join out of desperation. Yet critics warn that concentrating retirement savings in private hands creates a new form of financial dependency, one that could be even more dangerous than the pension systems it replaces. With retirement disappearing, a new economic structure forms around the aging workforce. Companies create flexible, low-impact jobs designed specifically for seniors. Housing evolves into dense, affordable micro-living units for older citizens. Healthcare becomes the most valuable industry on the planet. Technology firms develop tools to extend workability, exosuits, AI assistants, and adaptive workplaces. The elder economy emerges not by choice, but by necessity. Millions must continue working, and society must adapt to support them.